Okay, good afternoon. I'm Dr. David A. Paget. This is Urban Geography 4850, and today is May the 4th, and we have our guest today, Major Joe Womack from the Chess Organization of Mobile, Alabama, and Miss Liz Smith-Inser from the National Park Service, and they will be sharing with us some background on the Africatown community in Mobile, Alabama, and our project, which is related to the Africatown Connections Blueway. So our guests will introduce themselves and we'll move forward. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paget. Hey, everyone. I'll give a quick introduction of myself, and then Joe will introduce himself, and then it'll be back to me for a little more in-depth information about that Africatown Connections Blueway. So I work for a small program of the National Park Service called the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, and I would like to recruit every one of you to come and work with us at the National Park Service. It's a great organization to work for. And I can tell you more about that maybe on another class call, as I continue to always recruit folks for the National Park Service. I am based in Biloxi, Mississippi, and I serve projects in Mississippi, Alabama, and Puerto Rico in the work that I do. And I am really excited to just get to know you all as much as we can as we work on this project together. And so, Joe, I'll hand it over to you now to take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Liz. I'm a retired Major Joe Womack from Africatown. And as some of you all may have heard when I got on the call here, Africatown is what's known as the environmental justice community, EJ community. And there are different types. Every one of them is different. And Africatown is really unique. Now, Liz and I have known each other now for about 4 or 5 years. We've been working on a Blueway project. But she's going to talk more about the project itself and the spots that we've developed. But I'm going to give you a little background on the community. It's a very unique community, one of a kind, and special in a lot of ways. And in a way to give you what we're trying to capture in the storybook and with the Blueway Trail itself that we're developing. And it should help you as you go along with your project. As some of you all may or may not know, Africatown is the place in this country where the very last shipment of slaves came ashore. A lot of people know where the first shipment came ashore in Jamestown, Virginia, but not a lot of people know about the last shipment. And it came ashore in 1860. And that was actually about 52 years after it was made illegal to do. So you say, well, how did this happen? Well, let me just give you the story itself. I'll summarize it for you. Like I say, it was in 1859. There were some men going down at the riverboat, gambling like they always do, like they do now. Gambling, have a good time. And this was just before the Civil War had started, actually. And the word about the slave issue here in this country was really heating up. The slave trade had been ruled illegal for over 50-some years. But there was in the South, the slavery itself was still legal, still going on. A lot of people were against it, especially in the North. But down at this riverboat, there was some rich people down there. One of the richest was a local guy named Mayor, Timothy Mayor, big landowner. A lot of people say he owned Mobile before Mobile became Mobile, and probably still does. His family does. But in a card game, the guys started heated, and they were talking about slavery. And he said, "Doggone it, I bet you I can go and get a boatload of slaves and bring her back to this country right under the government's nose, and they'll never catch me." Another guy said, "No, you can't." He said, "Yes, I can." He said, well, he said, "Well, you want to bet? How much do you bet?" And he said $100,000. Now, this was in 1859. So if you throw it on your calculator, you figure this is worth about $2.5 million today. So it was a steep bet. And they were serious. So they shook hands, and and the bed was on. Now, Mayor had a couple of brothers and he had a lot of friends, like they all had money. And so they sort of went into a partnership together on this thing. And they came up with another $50,000 to make sure that this thing went off right. And they went and hired the best considered sea captain on the Gulf Coast, Captain William Foster. And Foster had a boat, and they took that boat and they converted it. Was a cargo boat. They converted it into it wasn't a traditional slave ship because it didn't look like one. It wasn't as big. A lot of the slave ships back then could hold about 300, 400, 500 slaves, but they converted the whole of it into a cargo hold that could hold about 100 slaves, because that was the bid. You had to bring back at least 100. And so Captain Foster got his crew together, and this thing was very hush hush, very secretive, because like I mentioned, the slave trade was illegal, and they had made it so that if they catch you, they could actually bring you to trial and hang you, especially if some of those slaves were killed trying to bring them back over the river. And so it was very, very hush hush. So Captain Foster got his crew together, about 10 of them with his first mate and him. That was a total about 12. And so they set forth going to Africa. As you know, over in Africa, the tribes were fighting each other, and the strongest would take the tribe that they defeated and put them in prison and sell them, because see, slavery was still going on throughout the world, just not in this country. It was big, especially in the Caribbean. And so they went off to Africa to get the slaves. So halfway over there, he stopped the ship and he said, "Look here," because he hadn't told them what they were going to pick up. And but they trusted him. He said, "Look, we're going to pick up a boatload of slaves." And they said, "What? Are you crazy? This is against the law, man. We can't do this." And he said, "Well," and they were going to come back, but he said, "Look, whatever Mayor promised you he was going to give you, I'll make sure he double it." They said, "You can do that?" He said, "Yeah, I can do that." So, okay, let's go. So they went on over down, went to what is now the Benin, the country of Benin. Back then it was called Dahomey, named after the Dahomey tribe. And Dahomey had a big chief, tough guy, Zila, Chief Zila. And his tribe was capturing a lot of the tribes in the surrounding area, put them in jail, put them in prison, and selling them for about $100 a piece. And this is the west coast of Ghana. So they went over there to Benin and got there in the evening. And so at that night they had a big powwow, and they made a bargain with the chief, actually 125 plus some supplies, because they had one of their supplies, and they had more people coming back. They wanted to bring these slaves back intact. You're not gonna get credit for a dead slave. So they was gonna get supplies and everything else. And so chief, it's just like the Black Panther movement. Most of the chief inner security were women. They were Amazon women, and they did most of the fighting, and they watched over most of the slaves. And so that next morning, they were putting them on this ship. They were putting the slaves on first, and then the cargo on last. And they looked out and they saw the big chief coming, and they knew that Zila was a bit of a crook. He had been known to sell the slaves and then come back the next day and take them back and run the people off, because what could they do? So they saw the big chief coming. So at this time, so Foster said, "Let's get out of here. Let's go." At this time, they had only loaded 110. So they left. No, yeah, 110. So they left 15 there on the shore, and all of the supplies. So they had to get out of there. And so they did. Now on the way back, it was tough. They ran into a couple of hurricanes, and I call them babies. The youngest one was 2 years old, and the oldest one was about 26. So they were very young, very young. And they remember I said that they left the supply. So they really didn't have much supply. They were using vinegar to stretch the water, and everybody, was very uncomfortable. Everybody, the crew and everybody. So had and they cried all the time because, like I said, they were youngsters. They just cried all the time. So halfway back, the crew committed mutiny. They committed mutiny, and they said, Captain, we taking over this ship. First time you see land, you put these slaves off, and we going home. We didn't sign up for this. And so the captain said, look here. You mean to tell me you're gonna go back home to your wife? You've been gone for 3 months. You're gonna go back home with nothing in your pocket, no money? Because if you do that, he gonna lose the bid, and he ain't gonna pay you. He ain't gonna pay me. He ain't gonna pay nobody. So you're gonna be gone for 3 months, and you're not gonna have anything to show for it to your wife and your kids. So they said, well, what can we do? They said, okay, here's what we're gonna do. On the way back, we're gonna go to the Caribbean and pick up some more supplies, and then we're gonna go on up to Mobile and put off these slaves. We got to make sure that we don't that we get them back and all of them back alive. They said okay, so that's what they did. Now on the way back, one of them did die. One of them died, didn't make it. And so as they were coming up the Caribbean on the different stops, um, someone back here, got the word back to the feds that this thing was on, and so the feds were waiting on him. So Timothy Mayor got the word down to him that the feds were going to be waiting on him. So they sort of changed the idea, and they said, as you hit the Mobile, the mouth of the Mobile Bay, keep going. Come in at night, keep going, and we're going up to a 12-mile island, and we'll put them out because the mayor owned that island up there, owned that property, still does. And so that's what they did. It came in the dead of the night, the night of July the 8th, 1860. And it was actually after 12, so actually it was July the 9th, but the night of July the 8th, 1860. And the feds was there, and the lighting was bad. It was at night. And so they was waiting for a ship to stop right there. But it sailed on up and went up 12 miles to 12-mile island, and that's where they put them on one of the Mail River boats and offloaded them. And they took this almost brand new ship they had outfitted out to the middle of the Mobile Bay, burned it and sank it. So they had no evidence. They never saw anybody coming ashore. They never saw anybody getting off the boat, and they burned the boat. Had no evidence, but they had the people here, and so the government took them to trial, Mayor and Captain Foster, but they found them innocent. And when you think about it, even back then, it was against the law for a slave to testify against his master. A slave couldn't testify against a white man, only against another slave. So even if the slave would have got up there in court and said, Your Honor, I took the picture of Foster with my cell phone, and here it is right here. There he is right there. You see it? That's him. He did it. The judge would have to say, well, disregard that evidence because he's a slave. He can't testify against nobody. So they got off, and according to some records, Mayor, not long after that, was bragging about all this and the fact that he won the bid and had a newspaper article printed up, and he was walking around innocent. And some people even said that this was one of the things that triggered the Civil War, because right after that the Civil War started, and it was always a touch and go between the North and the South, and slavery. And this man was running around, telling everybody he had done it when he had gotten off. Well, anyway, they put the slaves and they hid them out there in the swamp for about 2 weeks, and then they divided them amongst the people who were in the cahoots with them, and the Mayor family and his brothers took about 35 and brought them on back down to Mobile. and they already had some slaves living there on the river, called the Moors, Moors. So see, they were already there. Industry was not there. I mean, the mayor they had a shipbuilding company. They had a sawmill, but that wasn't real industrialization. And these slaves were living near the river. Mobile doesn't have any traditional plantation with cotton and all that, but anytime you work for free, you're a slave. You work for nothing. You're just living on the man's property, and then and living on the animals in the woods. And so this happened in 1860. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and of course, in 1865, the Civil War ended. And so they weren't slaves for long. They got there in 1860. 5 years later, they were free. And so they got there. Like I said, most of them were babies. They couldn't speak any English. They had nothing on their backs, no clothes, no, they were butt naked. But 5 years after that, in 1870, they had the wherewithal to have saved up their money, purchased about 5 square miles of mayor property, and claimed it as their own. They didn't just claim; they actually purchased it, and they had to sign documents. And actually went down to Mobile and incorporated that as their own area. They called it Africatown, about 5 square miles. That area still exists today. They built their own houses, had their own government. Now they didn't know anything about the American government, but they knew government about the tribes. They had come from a tribal system, so they were set up just like a tribe. So it was a point of history of the last official shipment of recorded shipment of slaves that came into this country in 1860, July the 8th. In 1870, they incorporated the land. So the first land in America that was incorporated by former freed slave, and they built their own houses in 1870. And so they built their church in 1872, built a cemetery right after that, and they established a school in that church in 1880. And so they were steadily progressing. Now, Africatown itself was right on the river. It's surrounded on 3 sides by water. 3 Mile Creek to the south, Mobile River to the east, and Hog Bayou to the north. So, and it's part of the Tensas River Delta, which is the second largest river delta in the United States of America. And it's protected by the National Wildlife Association, pretty much, with the exception of that little piece of land that's owned by the black people. That wasn't protected. Now, because of that non-protection, industry moved in there during the Industrial Revolution and pushed the people sort of back off their land. Well, before the end, though, when I mentioned that they came in and lived with the Moors on the river, they lived there for about 6 months, but they moved further inland because they wanted to be by themselves. They didn't like the fact that when it rained, it flooded. So they moved to the higher ground and established area now called Plateau, and then Magazine Point. Those are 2 areas that they incorporated into Africatown. And so, but those areas right along the river was when industrialization came, especially in the late 20s and early 30s. International paper and Scott paper moved into the area, and they pushed the people back off the river, and that was the beginning of things that really sort of had a 2-pronged edge. It gave people jobs, but at the same time it polluted because we didn't have the EPA back then. We didn't have no pollution laws. Everything was everything they just did what they could to produce the product, and there was no regard really for the environment. And that went on for years and years and years. Now, I mentioned that they established a church and a cemetery, and they established a school in that church. Now the school began to grow and grow because that was the only school in the entire Mobile County. And in the South, with education, there was a lot of schools that were established called training schools. You would have one training school in each county. So in Mobile County, our school became the training school, and it was the first training school for blacks in the state of Alabama, and it was certified by the state in 1910. Uh, it burned down mysteriously around 1915, and the elders in the community went to Booker T. Washington up in Tuskegee, and a man by the name of Julius Rosenwald. Some of you all might want to look that up. Julius Rosenwald. Rosenwald was the first CEO of Sears and Roebuck, and he was a philanthropist. He got with Booker T. Washington, and they together they built over 5,300 schools to educate free blacks and their descendants around the Southeast. And so we got money from them to help rebuild Mobile County Training School. And so we are official Rosenwald School. Now, of those 5,300 Rosenwald schools that they set up, only one is still educating black kids every day, and that's our school, Mobile County Training School. And so we're very proud of that. And Rosenwald is about to establish a Rosenwald Park in Chicago, where he was headquartered. And we're trying to get our school in there as one of the first schools to be part of the Rosenwald Park or museum. And so that's a big deal with us. And so we have, that's another point of history. You know, we have the fact that the last slave ship, the first community established by freed slaves. In Alabama, the first training school, and we're now with the last Rosenwald school that's remaining and still educating kids every day. So pretty much, I mentioned that they established a chief system with a chief and a medicine man, and the chief pretty much took care of everybody. It was just like being being in the jungle, where the chief was responsible for everybody. But then as things went along and they learned more about the American way of life, they sort of moved away from the chief life. Now that was a man that came in by the name of Nelson Adams, and he and his buddy came in, and they got work with the Mayer family at one of the lumber yards, and their job was to help bring lumber down the river so that they cut it up at the lumber yard. And so they were on the boat there with the Mayer family, and the lumber sometimes, as you may know, gets stuck. And so one of the Mayer boys went out there, and he slipped and fell, hit his head, and almost drowned. So Nelson Adams' friend, John Kidd, jumped over there and saved him. And so the Mayer family was very appreciative of that, and they asked him what they wanted. They said, well, we want some land. And so they gave him some land. So Nelson Adams was very frugal. He would save his money. And so he would buy more land. And so he saw a business opportunity. And so he bought a lot of land, and pretty soon he owned about as much land inside of Africatown as the Mayer family did. And so he established his own construction company. And what he did, he would build houses for the people that came to the town and wanted a house. On his land, he'll build houses and lease it to them, rent it to them, and then collect the rent and help them keep it up. So it worked pretty good for them. So they were still, pretty much taking care of the community. They set up even though they were incorporated, they never had any elections, but they had a group of men that sort of took care of things. They would call it the unofficial mayor of Africatown, and they would sort of pass that chair around, and that went on. So for the first 50 years, from 1860 to about 1910, I call it the year of the slaves. I use the word slaves because those that came over originally on the Clotilda, those ones that ran pretty much everything. But then after 1910, and I use that because that was when the school was officially certified and sanctioned by the state. From about 1910 to about 1960, that's when Nelson Adams and his friends started rule things, and industry came in, moved people back, and polluted. But they had no pollution laws. So the industry gave people work. The community grew up to about 10 to 12,000 people. There were kids everywhere. I mean, when I was born in 1950, two houses across the street, two houses behind me, house on either side, you had about 20 kids. Just you didn't have to go outside of your range there to get a football team, baseball team. So there were kids everywhere. So and fruit trees and a lot of stuff. It was just right. Everything was plentiful. But industry came in. I don't not only the paper mill, but other industry began to move into the area because we were right by the water. And as most of you all might know, when you and I see water, we think of recreation, fishing, swimming, boating. But the industrial man see water, he's thinking about pollution. You know, he did this somewhere I can dump my pollution, and that's what they did. So when you think about it, back then we didn't have any streets still. By 1960, they didn't have any streets. Everything was dirt road. So you would have the industry over here, right across the street, not just a street separating the community and industry. You have industry over here polluting everything going in the ground. And then right there, you have your outhouse, everything going in the ground. And then you have people putting water out of the ground, drinking it. And so the folks said, well, this ain't right. We need, it didn't taste funny. Nobody got sick or anything, I tell you that. But they wanted things better. Those leaders wanted things better for the community. Now, like I said, they got here in 1860. 100 years later, in 1960, the leaders of the community said we need to become part of the city of Mobile if we want to get in the better. Plus, the city of Mobile wanted those industries in Africatown because they were in the county, but they were not in the city and were not paying any taxes, city taxes. So the city courted Africatown. They said we'll give you water and sewer, we'll pave your streets. And they said, well, that sounds good to me. And so they did that. So in 1960, 100 years after they got here, they voted to become part of the city of Mobile. Mobile paved the streets. They gave them water and sewer because it wasn't free. They just hooked them up to the water and sewer line. And because of the overcrowding, they built a housing project in an area that was uninhabited, but it's part of Africatown, and call it the Josephine Island, or we call it Happy Hills area. They built a housing project to alleviate some of the overcrowding. And so they did that, but pretty much didn't do anything since, hadn't done anything since. Now, there are several reasons for that. One, Mobile, even though the city of Mobile is 300 years old, it had no mayor, mayor council form of government. So we had no representation in the government. You had at that time 3 councilmen voted at large. They all lived in the same area, on the same street, and went to the same church. They're all white, so they didn't do anything for any communities of colors in Mobile, especially Africatown. The only thing they did was what they began to start doing was rezoning stuff from residential to commercial and in industrial so that they can move more industry in on us. That was the beginning of them really pretty much trying to take back the land, as some of the people used to say. They used to say, well, the original Mr. Mayor let the slaves buy the land, and ever since then, his descendants have been trying to take it back, and that's exactly what it looks like. They've the city rezoned areas that used to have houses in it, and rezone them of commercial. We've got more industry, chemical industries all around us. Uh, the community been fighting against it for years and years, ever since I can remember when I came back in 1975. They've run highways and byways and bypassed and sort of separated the different parts of Africatown. Africatown used to have about what we call 12 neighborhoods. Now they have about 6 of them. Population has gone down. Well, first of all, but when Bill Clinton became president in around 1990, they established the environmental and justice policy. And so that's when the EPA was really doing work, and they were really monitoring some of these industries. Industries had pollution everywhere. And so they told International Paper and Scott's to either clean up their pollution control facilities or leave. So they said, we'll leave. And so they left. They pretty much left. Took them a few years to get out of there, but they pretty much left. and a lot of employees went with them to keep their jobs. But at that time, at the height of Africatown back in 1960, we had about 12,000 people. Now we're down to about 2,000. So what we're trying to do right now is bring the community back. And to bring the community back, there's a lot of things that we've done, and we are really fighting. We got outside agencies and outside people that want to help to come into the community and help us, especially with the environment situation. Africatown, as I saw it when I first really got involved, it was like trying to stop a runaway freight train. You know, you jump in front of it, you can't stop it. You just got to slowly bring it to a stop and then try to turn it around. And that's what we've been in the process of doing over the last 6 years. Now, unfortunately, we haven't gotten much help from the people from the city because they are still dealing with a plan that calls for pretty much the elimination of the entire community that they started back in 2010. But Africatown, fortunately, was put on the National Register for Historical Places back in 2012. Not all of it, but some of it. So we're working to try to get the rest of it on the National Historic Register. We hopefully that will help us a little bit. We have exposed through the media and other channels what's happening in the community. Some of you all may have seen what Africatown was on 60 Minutes with Anderson Cooper. And we were featured in the National Geographic magazine and Time magazine, Wall Street, and a lot of various things over the last 2 years. The Clotilda that they burned, they finally found that boat. And matter of fact, Liz and I was on the on the phone talking to people with the Slave Wrecks Project when they announced when somebody else announced that they had found the ship. And so the people that we were talking to were the ones that went out there and certified that they finally had found that ship. But so what we're doing, we're showing the community, not the community, but the city, the county, and the world that we've got our own plan. We've actually gotten a plan officially paid for by the city that we're working with and working by, and so I mentioned 50-year increments from 1860 to 1910, from 1910 to 1960, from about 1960 to about 2010. That's the years I call a year of struggle. They were really struggling against industry. Industry was taking over, and the community was fighting back, led by a man we call Henry Williams. Well, his name was Henry Williams. We called him the Godfather of Africatown. He wrote a few books about the community, and he was a very smart man. And but he led the fight against the industrialization of the city. Now I got involved about 2010, and I'm proud to say that I'm part of the current group of people that are not only fighting to keep industry out, but renovating the community, bringing it back, putting it in a position where that shows that we are an alive community, and we're focusing on tourism. The city has always said it wanted tourism, so this Blueway is a part of our tourism. We want it to be a part of the tourism where people can come. We're on the water, use canoes, swim, all sorts of recreation. And so this Blueway is going to be a big part of it. And with you all help, that's what we're hoping, that we can really promote the Blueway, have something official that we can give to people, that we can put up on the internet. People see it, say, hey, let's go down here and then spend a week in Mobile and participate at this Blueway and stuff like that. So you all could be a great help to what we're trying to do, and hopefully that little summary of what I've just said about Africatown will help you realize what we're trying to do. And now we'll let Liz tell you a little bit more about the Blueway. You ready, Liz?
I'm ready.
Well, just thank you, Major Womack. Are you able to stay for like maybe one question from the students, or?
Well, I can come back if you can have.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I'm
okay.
come back before she get off.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we'll
okay, I'll be back.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
See you, Joe.
All right.
Okay, should I jump right in?
Yes.
First, I'm curious, is this your first class? Or no, have you all met before?
Yeah, we met yesterday, but it's a Maymester class, so it's a whole semester in 12 days.
Yeah.
So it's very intense. So yeah, so we met yesterday. So yesterday was we did about 3 weeks worth of work yesterday, and today's the next day. So this is the second day of class.
All right, the next 3 weeks of work. Well, you just heard almost like 150 years of history in about 30 minutes. So, hey, everybody, it's really nice to see your little black boxes with your mute red microphones on my screen. Hello, I'm hoping that you can see me. Thank you. Well, is it okay? Just give me a wave and then put yourselves back on off camera. Oh, this is so great, virtual hugs. Hey, you guys. Joe and I are so thankful that you'll even allow us into your class, man, and the stuff that y'all are going to do in the next couple of weeks. This is really some amazing stuff. You are going to play a part of history. And so you just heard the connection to that history from Major Joe, but that was a lot to comprehend what he just explained. I'm going to go over it a little bit. I don't think you're going to be tested on the history of it, but boy, this is an internationally important topic. And so it's an honor to be here with you all. And we're just beginning here in the Africatown community. So, hey to you guys, if you want to go off camera, that's okay. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you some PowerPoint slides. I want to tell you a little bit about the National Park Service so you have a better understanding about what that is, because Smokey the Bear does not work for the National Park Service. He works for the U.S. Forest Service. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the National Park Service, and then my role within the Park Service, and then my connection to Africatown. So get ready, get comfortable. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see what it looks like when I share my screen here. So I'm going to share this one. And I think you see everything, even when I put it into presentation mode. I've got to ask you all too, does this look like a regular presentation? Or how about the question is, do you see yourselves on the screen? You can go, or yes.
I see it the presentation, but it's in like a gray box. So like I can see like the timer on the top and show taskbar and display settings and
Okay.
Yes, that's what I see too.
Well, let's just go for it. I think I have some different display settings, gray box, okay. Do you see the little squares that say you are sharing screen?
No, we don't.
No, ma'am.
Okay,
No,
I didn't
no,
want to block. Okay, right on. Well, here I am, gang. Even though I work in Mississippi and Puerto Rico and Alabama, I actually travel a lot for my line of work. So I wanted to tell you more about that. So, usually, National Park Service, people think of the big parks, Yosemite National Park's out in California, and look, the Grand Canyon. This is one of my favorite photos. It just shows the majesty of the Grand Canyon out there in Arizona, on the edge of Utah. Yellowstone National Park. I have never been to Yellowstone National Park, but people say yes, it is that blue. I'm curious to know if anyone on the phone has ever been to Yellowstone. Anybody?
No.
I have not. So notice, if you're not familiar with it, look at that photo and you can see there's a walkway on the other side of the blue pool. And that is the boardwalk that visitors walk along to look at these geysers. And so it's just really cool. And you can log in to Yellowstone National Park and see live videos, real-time geyser shots. So if you're ever interested about what's going on at Old Faithful over in Wyoming, go Google that and you could see the live shots of all the different geysers that are happening. A little bit closer to home to Alabama. Now you guys are based in Tennessee, and so I have some slides connected to Alabama because Africatown's in Alabama. Within the National Park Service, we have national park units. And so there's national parks, national monuments. We have things called national preserves. And we also, okay, pause for a moment. Sit tight, there we go. Here's a national monument that is a cave. This is up in northern Alabama, Russell Cave National Monument. Birmingham's Civil Rights National Monument is one of our brand new national monuments that's in Alabama. And then Freedom Riders is also a new national monument. When President Obama was leaving office, when presidents leave office, a lot of times they have like a magic wand and they create new national monuments and national parks. And so we were lucky enough to have Freedom Riders created. Another type of national park is a focus on military parks. This is Horseshoe Bend National Military Park in the very northern reaches of Alabama. Here is a highlight of Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Park. So you'll hear of national historic parks, national recreation sites. This is a historic site. There's also related to Tuskegee Institute, and the Tuskegee University is the National Historic Site there. The National Park Service is also in charge of things called National Historic Trails. So you don't have to work in a national park site. You could work on these national historic trails that are across the US that connect many states. This one happens to be, it connects Selma to Montgomery. The Trail of Tears is a multi-state national historic trail that goes through Tennessee, Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, many states connected to Trail of Tears. We have an entire program focused on national historic trails within the National Park Service. We need lots of GIS folks to work in this particular program. Within the National Park Service is also, I'll say it's a program called National Heritage Areas. National Heritage Areas are managed by communities within in the states. And the National Park Service supports the development of national heritage areas. And so an example here is Muscle Shoals National Heritage Area in the northern parts of Alabama. We work a lot with the Navy. And I have the slide because of the connection between the Blue Way and the US Navy. Within the National Park Service, we have all of these national parks, monuments, programs, and then the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program is one program within the National Park Service that provides technical assistance to communities throughout the USA. And let me move this over here. You can see a little bit better. Do things like meeting facilitation. We'll gather folks together. We provide ideas about how to use your natural spaces as outdoor classrooms. We don't provide funding support for projects. We provide technical support. So there are a lot of GIS folks that work for our program. There are a lot of landscape architects that work for our program, and a lot of community planners that work for the program. And we go out into the communities and help folks accomplish their conservation and recreation goals. And so I was introduced to a group called the Mobile County Training School Alumni Association. If you remember, Joe mentioned the Mobile County Training School in his talk. And he's a good storyteller, isn't he? Do you recognize Joe in this slide? Here's Joe. Lorna Woods is a descendant of that slave ship Catilda, and another key figure and leader in the community is Mr. Anderson Flynn. Hopefully he'll be able to present to you during your time. The Mobile County Training School applied for technical assistance and said, we would like to connect some special places within the community of Africatown via a pedestrian trail. And I started to work with him, and we decided that maybe we want to connect via the water. We want to reconnect people to the waterways, and we want to highlight some of the stories connected to the water. And so I started working with them. The next few slides, let me see here, are a review of a history of what Joe talked about. And so I'm going to sort of breeze through these things, but I do want to remind you all of the significance of the Mobile County Training School. He mentioned it was a Rosenwald school, and he also mentioned whenever the kidnapped Africans that were enslaved, they were kidnapped from Africa, brought over to Mobile on the slave ship Catilda. Eventually, they settled and they created their own community organization, we'll call it, for a lack of a better term, a community atmosphere. They wanted to educate their children, and they actually bought land back from the very same person that enslaved them. And to this day, the Mobile County Training School, what is now called the Mobile County Training School, represents that educational ethic of the people that came over and established an educational place for their children. So I wanted to emphasize that. I want to show you a photo of a friend of ours. This is a big celebrity, y'all. She's appeared in National Geographic magazine and 60 Minutes and some National Geographic shows, Joycelyn Davis. She is a descendant of the slave ship Catilda. And hopefully, even though you might not have a chance to visit Africatown while you're in this Maymester course, you're going to be learning the stories. We're going to talk about the points of interest of this Africatown Connections Blueway. In the future, if you ever visit Africatown, come on down, and Joycelyn would love to meet you. I show you her because I think what's true of a lot of African Americans is it's rare that they actually can trace their ancestry. And Joycelyn's special, and many of the people in Africatown are special because they can trace their ancestry to the slave ship. And then it's documented where those particular folks that were kidnapped in Africa, where they are from within the African communities. So here's a photo sketch of her uncle. This gentleman came across on the slave ship Catilda. And so I also wanted to show you here the lineage, that this is just a photo of someone's hand-sketched connection to this family of Charlie Lewis. The next slide is just sort of a reminder about what was going on in 1860 related to slave trade. What Joe mentioned was in the early 1800s, international slave trade was made illegal. You could not transport, in the US at least, you could not import and trade slaves that have been internationally imported. The catch is, Joe mentioned these two gentlemen. I wanted to show you a photo of them so you would know the significance of this. So let me just kind of repeat my perspective of the story because it's something else. So the man on the left, Timothy Mayer, he was a very wealthy landowner in the area of the city of Mobile back in the late 1800s. And as Joe mentioned, the story goes is that he was just having a few drinks with some friends and they were bantering back and forth. And perhaps his pride, maybe a little bit of greed got a hold of him. And he was the gentleman that said, no one's going to tell me that I cannot go to Africa and import slaves. And he, sure enough, took on a bet. And on a bet, he hired Captain William Foster to sail to Africa to purchase kidnapped Africans and bring them back to Mobile. Now, I don't have a photo or I don't have a real good depiction of the slave ship Catilda, but this is a painting of it. Joe mentioned that it wasn't the average slave ship, and that's right. It was a schooner, and I'm not big on boat things. I think that's really neat, but I don't know boats from one boat to another. But apparently this was a smaller boat. Schooners are built to swiftly glide, go quickly. And so they rigged up the bottom of the schooner to carry cargo. And the next slide is a bit disturbing. You all may have seen something similar, but I think it's important that we remember what folks went through. And so this is an idea of, this isn't exactly what happened in the slave ship Catilda, but this is a historical photo of what slave owners, people that were purchasing other humans and bringing them over from Africa, what they were thinking. How many could we squash into a ship and bring across what we call the Middle Passage? It was a miserable time. And from what I understand in the Catilda Passage, it took a few months to come across. And if you remember, Joe mentioned that they came in at the dark of night because it was illegal. They were not supposed to be coming in with people in the hull of the ship. And they sailed in the dark of night up in the northern reaches of Mobile Bay. And the story is that they transferred the cargo from the Catilda slave ship onto another steamboat that was owned by, let me go back real quick. Sorry, I don't want to make you dizzy. Mr. Mayer owned a steamboat, transferred the kidnapped Africans to the hull of the steamboat. And if you could imagine, this is at night. There were patrons on the steamboat that were curious about what's going on. Why are we up here? Why are we stopped? Everything is fine. Everything's fine. Go back to sleep. And the steamboat took off, I think, to plantations in the northern parts of Mobile River. While Mr. Mayer, while Captain Foster went about burning the Catilda slave ship. And why I wanted to repeat this story, it should be repeated over and over. I wanted to repeat it because what's important is evidence was burned. And Joe mentioned that there was no evidence, and that these folks went to trial and they were allowed to go free because there was no evidence. And so for many, many, many years, it was sort of a myth. But come on, folks, human beings were telling the story. But because of the framing, we'll just call it the white frame of the story, it was never told, and there was no ship. So, well, what is this? And so people were sort of embarrassed to talk about it. So let me go on with what I understand to be true. So time went on. We were talking, the slave ship Catilda comes in 1860. 1865, the Civil War begins and ends. And then there are a number of freed Africans. And remember, these Africans that were brought over on the Catilda, they didn't have an idea about what is this thing called slavery. We don't understand this. Many of the people that were brought over on the Catilda were leaders in their African communities. One, I understand, was royalty. And so they didn't have an idea about what this idea of slavery was. And they were very civic minded in their own way. One of the gentlemen that you all might be familiar with is Cujo Lewis. He was known from a long time to be the last known living person, or the person who lived the longest, who had actually traveled over on the slave ship Catilda. And not long after, there was a person named Ridoshi, a female, that was actually, Cujo Lewis grew up in the area of Africatown. Ridoshi was sold to a plantation owner outside of Mobile County. And so she wasn't known about until really just a few years ago. So her story is important. I've talked a lot. Do we need to do a check-in or a little breather about everything? How's everyone doing? I don't know how you did it yesterday, but did you take any breaks, I'm hoping, or did you just let folks kind of wander off and wander back when they needed to?
Yeah, normally we're taking breaks after about every hour or so. I mean, so did you want to do that now, or?
It might be good. Let me do a little checkaroo here and see. I'm gonna go on yeah, I think it might be a good time to take a quick break. If you want to do it.
Yeah, that's
and
fine. That's fine, because what I've been doing is just breaking the videos up into hours, because otherwise, if I went straight through it, it'd be just this massive file that I don't know if I could be able to get into YouTube. Okay, so let me
I'm going to stop sharing my screen for right now, because everyone definitely needs a stretch break. I gave you a little bit of history. When we come back, I can do a little bit more of modern time stuff, what's going on in Africatown, and then maybe another 20-30 minutes about the Blue Way itself.
Okay, so we're going to take a 8-minute break. We will, I mean, I'm not going anywhere, but we will I'm going to stop recording now. So this was the first segment for May 4th, 2021. During the break, if there's anyone here for the first time and is wondering what's going on, I'll be here to answer questions. I'm going to stop recording now.